All right, welcome everyone to our Electrifying Weird Loads webinar. We're going to be talking about a few different exciting technologies today, including heat pump pool heaters, electric lawnmowers, electric leaf blowers, and some other electrified garden technology. So, several great panelists with us here today and talking about some kind of under-mentioned technologies, I'd say. I think we tend to talk about a lot of what goes directly in the home, but we'll be talking about kind of the adjacent building technologies as well. So very stoked for this. This webinar is sponsored by San Diego Learn. It was developed in partnership with the Learn program, which is a San Diego-based workforce education and training program that partners with NBI to offer a whole bunch of free energy efficiency and electrification webinars. So if you're on a learning journey, want to check out some more cool stuff from SD Learn, definitely go to their website and see more. They have a whole great suite of webinars on a variety of topics. So I was previewing this a little bit before, but what are we going to discuss in today's webinar? So first things first is electrifying residential and commercial pools with heat pumps. This can be a tricky one since pools obviously are a very high volume of water, thousands of gallons, and we know that heat pumps typically reheat a little bit more slowly than their fossil fueled counterparts. So we will have Dylan Anderson from Redwood Energy coming on to talk about some of the ways that we can overcome those challenges, save a bunch of energy and operating costs with heat pumps. He'll also discuss how we size heat pumps, which is going to be, not necessarily as intuitive, right? Because again, heat pumps are, a little slower but more efficient than gas or electric resistance options. We'll also discuss some electrification of garden equipment, especially leaf blowers and lawnmowers. I think everyone here is probably familiar with just how loud gas leaf blowers can be. I work remotely, and probably about once a week, I have someone blowing a gas leaf blower right outside my window, and I cannot hear a darn thing. So, very excited for more electric leaf blowers out there as well as the many benefits they offer, like lower emissions and operational cost reductions, which Breshin Billingsley will be talking about, as well as Brian Stewart and Doug Gannon. So great panelists there. They'll also discuss some of the benefits and real world challenges that we'll mostly be focusing on commercial and professional teams using this equipment. So with that, I'll intro our panelists quick, but I'll let them give a more in-depth intro when they start presenting. So we have Dylan Anderson from Redwood Energy, Brian Stewart from Electrify Now, and Breshin Billingsley from Stihl. We're also joined by Doug Gannon from Stihl. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dylan to talk about heat pump pool heaters. Thanks for being on, Dylan.
Awesome.
I'll stop sharing.
Cool. How's it going? I'm Dylan Anderson. I work for Redwood Energy. I've been there about 6 years now. I like to call my role electrification analyst. So I'm going to go over just briefly because I think this audience is pretty familiar with heat pumps. But I'm going to go over what a heat pump does and talk a little bit about heat pump water heaters, and then we'll go into residential grade heat pump pool heaters for folks' homes, single family home installations, and then talk about hot tubs too, because um, heat pump pool heaters have also been sort of advanced into being able to heat hot tubs as well, which is impressive because it's a smaller volume, but it's a higher temperature. And then we'll talk about commercial grade heat pump pool heaters as well. And then I'll go into a case study about a hotel in upstate New York that converted to a pool heating system. It was one of the early conversions, and it's in a cold enough climate that at the time they had to do some kind of interesting stuff that nowadays, especially, in California and like the southern parts of the US that are warmer, it's not really something that we have to think about. And um, you may be surprised to hear that a lot of pool heat pumps are moving in the direction of having cold climate technology as well. And then there's a pretty great affordability argument for doing the conversion, which is somewhat unusual I'm basing my math in California because that's what I'm familiar with, where we have really high electric rates and pretty low to average natural gas rates, which can make it difficult sometimes unless the device that you're switching from gas to electric, natural gas to electric, is so efficient that it can overcome that cost differential. And in this case, pool heat pumps tend to do that. Um, there's all sorts of caveats there. If you're not using electric resistance basically as like a booster, it's gonna it's gonna be able to overcome that price difference. I should talk about Redwood Energy a little bit. We're kind of half and half research, almost like a electrification kind of think tank, but we're small. We have like 12 full-time staff. And then the other half we do Title 24 energy consulting. Um, and we've written like hundreds of pages of guides to electrification that are available for free on our website. Um, and yeah, relevant to this one, I'm going to be talking about stuff that comes up in the single family and the commercial guide, and the single family retrofits guide, and the commercial retrofits guide. Um, Multifamily, I've started to see, we do most of our Title 24 work in multifamily, and I've started to see more of our projects have pools on site, but they tend to not be heated when we do have pools. So that's kind of an area. We had a couple projects recently that explored the idea of heating the pool, but decided that, it would add to their owner carried bill to a point where it didn't make sense for them. But with that, like I said, I think we're all pretty familiar with heat pumps, and you could take a whole semester class just on how these actually work. But basically, you put a little bit of energy into the device, and it moves the heat from one direction or to the other. Um, that can be air to air, like we might be familiar with air conditioners, or just a form of heat pump that only works one direction. A heat pump can work either direction. And then what we're doing is we're taking heat from the air and putting it into the water. Um, and this process of doing that tends to be between like 3 to 5 times more efficient than if you were to try to just heat that water with a tea kettle element, or there's other elements for cooling, but basically it gives us a very strong mechanical advantage. If you're familiar with physics, you can also think of it as like it's kind of like a lever. It gives you a mechanical advantage, but in terms of heat. Um, so heat pump water heaters come in two main forms. We might be familiar with seeing the Ream heat pump water heaters at Home Depot or Lowe's. Those are kind of like a form factor that's as best as they can trying to fit in where a gas or a traditional electric resistance water heater would fit. And then there are also split systems. I have the Sandco 2 pictured, but there's a new one that has come out and people seem to like, by a company called Ecological. The Sandco 2 is really cool because it uses CO2 as its refrigerant. So if there is ever a refrigerant leak, the refrigerant is CO2. So it has a global warming potential of 1. For reference, I mean, there's debate on the numbers, but um, most of the refrigerants that are out there right now are still 134A. We've made a whole bunch of switches to a bunch of different refrigerants, but the bottom line is usually it's like 1,300 global warming potential, and this has a global warming potential of 1. Sanco 2 is also super efficient. Um, the Ecological has come out with a more traditional, well, you know, more traditional to the market that's allowed to be there right now refrigerant. I think it's 454B. Forgive me if I got that wrong, but it's a more common refrigerant that you see in most products today, and it uses the same method of there's that little box that sits outside, and then you keep the tank inside. That helps with the efficiency a little bit, and it gives you more storage volume for a given amount of space in your house. But it also allows you to not have to deal with what can sometimes come up with normal heat pump water heaters, like the Ream, where have you basically have a box sitting on top of a tank here that is essentially it's going to be doing dehumidification and cooling inside your house, depending. You can add vents here that can help with that and almost mostly mitigate that in your home, but there's going to be some indoor air effects that oftentimes are good. We've seen heat pump water heaters be adopted super early, like 10, 15 years ago in the South, which I'll be bringing the South up a lot because heat pump technology is very nice for them in the sense that it's humid and hot. So getting that dehumidification and cooling is really good. Um, like where I'm at in California is a humid part of California, but most of it is pretty dry. So that's something to think about. Basically you just want to, if you do one of these, you want to vent. And the Sanko 2 is a little more expensive, but it's going to be very efficient and very reliable. And then there's also the ecological product that just came out. Um, so similarly, in this case, right, I don't have a good diagram of this, but the heat pump pool heater is going to be sitting outside and it's going to be taking heat from the air and putting it into your pool. It's pretty straightforward idea. What I'm picturing here is a few products that have been on the market for a long time. Um, Generally speaking, one thing about heat pump pool heaters is they tend to have a threshold that is higher for when they want to shut off, when they want to stop working anymore. Um, this is basically done. You can see this on the right with the Pentair, and I want to mention that Pentair, Hayward, Raypak, and Aquacal have all come out with new products that are a lot um, better at avoiding this problem. But um, for a long time, there was an issue where heat pump pool heaters would hit a certain outdoor air temperature. If it gets below 45, they have to shut themselves off because otherwise the equipment will basically start forming ice on the side of it. The way that they get around this is primarily with inverters, although sometimes an inverter is basically, you can think of it like a transmission in your car. It shifts gears and just makes it easier for the heat pump to run at a certain speed so that it can take advantage of as much heat in the air as possible. And then when things go back to warmer temperatures, like once it gets to 60 degrees or so, it goes back into its first gear and kind of can relax a little bit. But um, any of these products are pretty typical for like a residential pool. There's not really such thing as like a really typical residential pool because there's so much gradation in terms of people can put as big of a pool as they want if they have the big enough property and the money to do so. But um, for like a typical kind of like 20 by 18 and average depth of 5 feet, any of these products will work. The thing that we'll get to in a little bit is that AquaCal has developed a tool that will help you size your pool heat pump. And one of the really cool things that that tool does is it tells you how many hours per day on the coldest day, 99% of the time of the year, your pool heater will run. So if your pool heater has to run more than, say, 16 to 18 hours, your pool heater is going to be insufficient. to maintain a temperature in your pool on that coldest day. Now, I imagine for a lot of us, a common thing that I've seen happen is that people get a pool and they don't use it that often. And you can, if you're conscious of that, say, hey, maybe in the coldest month of the year, I'm just not going to expect to swim in a heated pool. And, making that kind of choice is another way to save money and also help you size the equipment correctly for what you actually want to do with your home. Um, Hot tub heat pumps started coming onto the market probably like 3 years ago. And similar to pool heat pumps, there's been a lot more developments too in this area. Um, Mostly due to the fact that they only have a small volume that they have to heat. For a longer time, they've been able to do inverters and operate at extremely low temperatures. Like we have the SwimMax InverBoost, which can go down to 10-degree outdoor air. For reference, that is as cold as you expect Long Island to get in a year. So that's the Northeast. It's not the coldest part of the Northeast, but that's pretty good. For most of the country, this is going to work most of the time. Um, and so this is like a good development that we've been able to take advantage of. One thing with hot tubs and pools just in general is that above ground pools and hot tubs are going to lose heat faster to the atmosphere than if it's in ground. So if you have an in-ground hot tub, you don't necessarily need as beefy of equipment, you might say, to maintain a certain temperature because over the course of a day, a month, a year, the heat that you're losing to the atmosphere is significantly less. You're basically insulating because you have the pool surrounded by dirt, which is very good at insulating. Um, and relevant to that too is the question of like, okay, what do we do when we have a really big pool, like an Olympic sized pool? Um, that is a difficult problem. Um, this label is wrong. This should actually say the AquaCal Great Big Bopper is what it's called, which is a 500,000 BTU heat pump pool heater. And on the math, it actually takes five of those to heat a typical Olympic sized pool in like common like climates in California, such as like San Jose or LA, places where the design temperature doesn't get that cold, but for, you know, relevant like comparing San Jose to Florida, San Jose is chillier than Florida for sure. Um, so yeah, this is the AquaCal Great Big Bopper is what this is called. I'll put that in the chat and I'll change these slides before we share them out. But um, this device is about 5 times as big as a residential grade heat pump pool heater. And then in order to heat an Olympic-sized swimming pool, which people do right now with gas, they deal with that similar problem by getting a bigger gas boiler, essentially, heater to heat that pool. And this is pretty much only going to be something that you see in like school districts or like very, very fancy like gyms and things like that. Um, and they kind of have already built into their budget the operating costs of using all that natural gas. So on an annual basis, switching to a heat pump pool heater will save them like a lot of money over the course of the year. Um, One of the difficult things workaround with this though is that usually if you're going to try to retrofit a pool heater that's gas to an electric heat pump pool heater, the electric equipment on site, basically the breaker box, the circuits, all that stuff is not going to be sized quite correctly for it. So you may end up having to do a service upgrade. Um, Although we have seen projects where the math is very close, and if you do some smart stuff, you can get around it. There are devices, they're called circuit sharers or circuit pausers, that can basically you isolate the circuit for the pool heater, and then when that device, the circuit pauser sees that the panel is loaded to 80% or whatever threshold you set, it'll turn the pool heater circuit off, which sounds bad, but it takes for large pools especially, but this is a pretty similar thing for a residential pool. It takes up to a couple days to heat up to temperature because you just have so much water. I mean, if you think about it, if you use all of the water in your traditional tank water heater, it takes a couple hours sometimes, depending on how nice of a water heater you have. But when you're looking at this giant volume of water, that's part of why the sizing also has to take into account needing five of the great big boppers to get all the way to temperature.
Dylan, just a couple minutes warning here.
Cool.
Going great
Thank
though.
you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. So relevant to all this, I want to just kind of briefly discuss, like I said, this is kind of an older case study of Tamarack Club Slopeside Hotel, which is in upstate New York. They had been running their pool heating system and their hot tub heating system off of propane, which if you have ever lived on propane, it's pretty expensive. Even if you're really frugal, you can get like a $600 bill per month. So you can imagine that this project saved them a lot in operating costs, and they did it pretty early. I don't remember if it was 2010 or 2008, but there weren't really cold climate heat pump pool heaters on the market yet. So what they did was they use an air source heat pump water heater to do a first pass of heating the water up to a certain temperature. I think it was, 105, 110. And then they use another pass of a separate heat pump system, which is water to water. Um, you can almost kind of think of it like it's a ground source heat pump, but they use this cascading system to increase the heat output that they're able to get. And then what they're kind of doing as well is using a mixing valve to take cold water from the city or from the mountain spring that they're at and mixing that in with the hot water that they've made. So they heat the water up way above the temperature that they want to actually put into the hot tub at 103. They heat it to 140 and mix it in with cold water and then treat it and stuff after. Um, Something also to mention is like pool heat pumps are very distinct from um, like traditional residential heat pump water heaters in the sense that at some point they have to take in water that may have been chlorinated. So that's something that you have to figure out how to deal with. And they've changed how their um, evaporator coils and stuff look so that it can handle those kinds of chemicals. And generally speaking, if you're doing like a salt pool, it, there's ways to do it, and you would have to talk to someone who's like full-time job is only pool heat pumps to figure that one out. But I think it's basically that you are having to put the salt downstream and then you have to retreat it before. But yeah, for this project has been a pretty great success. And yeah, it just I think it goes to show that there's value in like being an early adopter and being willing to take these kinds of risks and having strong team members that can help navigate problems when they arise too. Um, for instance, like the math on a Olympic sized swimming pool has been difficult, and I personally haven't seen it happen, but I did hear that it has happened in the United States, but unfortunately I didn't get like I don't know where yet. So I'm still trying to find that out. If you know anything about a Olympic pool in the US that is heated with a heat pump water heater, I would love to talk to you. Um, so I've been talking about how it's affordable for a long time. Um, Again, basically this comes down to the efficiency of the heat pump equipment is so good that it's overcoming the effect of electric rates being high in California. So these numbers here I'm showing are the annual costs of using the heat pump versus gas system. I mean, heating a pool is expensive no matter what you do. Like this would be basically tripling or quadrupling my electric bill. But another thing that's important to mention here is use a pool cover. If you're going to heat the pool, you want to cover the pool so that you're not evaporating all that hot water into the atmosphere and just having it go to waste. There are pool covers that are, automatic that can identify when someone's in the water and things like that. There's hard cover um, pool covers is a common, like, very serious concern is if someone's pet or somebody gets into the pool and is underneath the cover. So there are hard cover ones that you can get that are like made of vinyl so that they can, just basically be safer. And they have automatic openers too that will roll the cover back if they identify that someone's in the water. Um, and yeah, this is actually the math for a pretty small pool. But the effect is ba of the pool cover basically has to do with how much surface area versus how much volume is in the pool. So if you have a really wide, shallow pool, the pool cover becomes even more important. Just has more space that it can vent to atmosphere. And then I want to shout out Aquacal, which is one of the manufacturers I've talked about a lot. Honestly, because they have come out with this really cool sizing tool that has helped the industry and helped us make this argument to landowners and homeowners and um, project managers in California. Um, I want to just really quickly go over some future recommendations for California. Heat pump pool heater incentives should be increased and made more available. I was surprised to find I dug into like the census data, and it turns out that approximately 16% of California single-family homes have a pool. Of those, we know 50% of them have some kind of pool heater, whether it's gas or electric. Of those, we know 90% are gas. So approximately 7% of California single-family homes have a gas pool heater. So, you know, nearly 1 in 10. What is that, like 1 in 12? Um, Surprisingly common. And yeah, like I said, it's difficult to transition a large pool from gas to a heat pump, but it's been possible for years, and um, it's never been more doable than now. Um, and yeah, circuit sharing will definitely help for gas to electric retrofits.
Cool. Dylan, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Really appreciate you being on. We do have to move on to the next presentation here, but Really, really interesting stuff. Got a lot of questions in the chat. So we're going to go back to those in the last maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And we'll kind of do a, have you come back on camera. We'll do some Q&A. But really, really appreciate all the great insights there. I'm going to hand it over to Brian now to kind of move on to our next segment, which is garden equipment and electrifying there. So thanks again, Dylan.
Great. Well, thanks. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. My name is Brian Stewart. I'm the co-founder of Electrify Now. We're a real small electrification, education oriented organization in Portland. And we primarily, most of the time we're talking about heat pumps for space heating and heat pumps for water heating, electric vehicles and stuff. But this topic is actually one of my favorites because it's just such an example, I think, of how electrification is better. And I'm going to mostly be talking about this in terms of what the issues are with our current, status quo with gas-powered equipment. And from a homeowner standpoint, it's pretty much of a no-brainer. But we also have Breshin, Billingsley, and Doug Gannon from Stihl, who will be coming on after my presentation here. We'll do a lot of Q&A, and they will give you a really good idea about what's going on, the exciting things that are going on in the commercial space. So why is yard care such an important thing? I mean, I love this idea of weird loads, but in this case, it's kind of one of those sneaky things that there are just a lot of gas-powered devices in our country. 650 million is the estimate that I've seen, and that's from Consumer Reports. And these things are predominantly, all these that we're talking about, these gas-powered machines are a significant source of carbon pollution, of course, which some of us really care about, air pollution, which everyone cares about, dangerous noise and toxic waste that also most people really care about. So it's not insignificant, these polluting influences of this kind of sneaky, out of sight equipment that, or weird loads, as Noah calls them. So from a carbon pollution standpoint, I don't have good data for all the tools, but for mowing, the US government has really good information. That's something like 1.2 billion gallons of gasoline is burned per year for mowing lawns in the United States. Just to give you a perspective, that's about almost 15 million tons of carbon emissions. It's equivalent to over 2 million cars. Okay, so it's not insignificant. It's just all these things add up to pretty big numbers. And on the air pollution standpoint, it's even worse of a picture because gas-powered tools, these small engines that are in gas-powered tools, are far more polluting than cars because they don't have the same pollution controls that our automobiles have. So this is a famous statistic from the California Clean Air Resources Board. It's that their calculations show that 1 hour of commercial leaf blower, a backpack style leaf blower, is equivalent in terms of air pollution to driving a typical car like a Toyota Camry or something like that, 1,000 miles, over 1,000 miles. I mean, so it's pretty, this is 1 hour of use, 1,000 miles of driving. It's pretty crazy. And, you can dive into this, what are the pollutants? They're PM 2.5, which we're really familiar with, getting more and more attention as a really important pollutant that causes all sorts of things from heart and lung disease to dementia. But of course, there's other things like NOx, which is a really big issue in California, benzene and formaldehyde, which are really important cancer-causing agents. All of these things come from these small gas engines that do not burn fuel completely, et cetera, and therefore cause much more air pollution than our automobiles do. So just to give you an idea, if you're someone who has a commercial crew come and do your yard, they can be in your yard for a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. Well, the pollution that's created from a couple guys using a couple different tools for half an hour is equivalent to having a car revving in your driveway for 10 hours. I think most people would just be horrified if they knew that, or if they, no one would think, I think, that it was a good idea to have your car revving for 10 hours in your driveway. But yet, because this is kind of invisible to us, this equivalent happens every time we have one of these commercial folks come to our yards. So this is why all these air pollution reasons add up to why the state of California has banned the sale of smart small gas engines starting in 2024. That basically means that if you've got one of these now and you're a homeowner, you've got a gas, lawnmower or something, don't panic. You don't need to give it away, but you won't be able to buy a new one because of this pollution problem that is a really big deal in California, particularly. All right. Then the other dangerous aspect of these machines is noise. I think all of us have experienced this, but gas powered tools can cause permanent hearing loss. Hearing loss is kind of really, it's a, what do you call it? It's like a pandemic. It's like a really big problem in the world in general. We kind of don't really see this, but think about what things in nature can you think of that make the same amount of noise as a gas leaf blower? Virtually nothing. So our bodies are just not ready for this. This is the scale that's used by the American Academy of Audiology, and it's decibels on the left there. Those numbers go from 0 at the bottom to 110 at the top. And for every 10 decibels of increased loudness, that is equivalent from a human perception standpoint to the noise being twice as loud. So you can see down in the bottom in that green zone, faint sounds are like leaves rustling. A quiet library would be under 50. A moderate noisy environments, like some people talking in a restaurant or something like that's going to be in the 60s. Anything over 70 dBA becomes dangerous. And when you get over 85 to 90, you can get permanent hearing loss in minutes. I mean, it's not like long exposure. It's like literally minutes. Then this is permanent hearing loss. So if you look at gas power tools, they're all over 80. There's a few that you can find that they're specifically built to be lower, and they're in the 70s. But the ones that are really used are all over 80, and some of them are as high as 100, and even as high as I've seen some that are as high as 110. So if you're not wearing ear protection, you're basically blowing your ears out and just using them for one job. So that's why this thing is. That's why this is so important. Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. And that's again why you see a lot of noise ordinances in cities that have banned or restricted loud machines like leaf blowers, which are kind of some of the worst offenders in terms of this noise. They tend to be noisier than lawnmowers, for example. All right. The other thing that's a little bit invisible with these tools is the solid toxic waste. I mean, imagine this, anyone who's had experience, filling up a lawnmower. First of all, you get your gas can out. You're probably going to spill a little bit on the side of the machine, maybe ends up on your grass. You don't worry about it that much. You got an oil can that you glug in there, and then you throw the oil can away. You got to replace the filters and the oil filters. All that stuff goes to landfill. It's millions and millions of pounds of toxic waste every year, spark plugs, et cetera, that goes to our landfills from this kind of slightly innocuous weird load. And this is why battery electric is just so much better. It's as powerful as gas. We'll talk more about that. It has instant start, no more, pulling the ripcord. It just push the button, it goes on. There's no refueling, like we were talking about with a gas can. Yes, you have to change the batteries, but there's no messy tune-ups or engine, maintenance that has to happen. They're dramatically quieter and very, very low carbon emissions. We'll talk more about that. On the power and durability side, this is a thing that the electric tools have been battling for years. And I think it's fair to say that, 10 years ago, electric equipment wouldn't have been capable of taking on really big jobs in the outdoor industry or commercial jobs for sure. But that's just no longer the case. And if you look at, like Pro Tool Review, which is one of the really good resources for talking about tools, they do really good, thorough testing. They say that the best battery powered lawn equipment and mowers have legit gas power replacement. And Consumer Reports talks about them being more reliable than gas ones. So there's a lot of the innovation that's happened in this space really is bringing them onto par with gas powered tools. And if you look at the noise situation, it's no contest. All the electric devices are typically under 70 dBA. There might be a couple that get up to 75, but from what I've seen, they're almost all under 70, which means that, you still should use air protection, absolutely, but you're not in danger of blowing out your eardrums in just minutes of use with these devices. And, I think, Noah, you just mentioned about someone using a gas leaf blower outside your home. We regularly do webinars with Electrify now, and our crew that does our lawn uses electric tools. They can be using the electric leaf blower literally right outside my window, 3 feet away from me with one pane of glass in between, and nobody on the webinar would even hear it. So these things are incredibly quiet compared to gas. They're also, and we'll talk more about this with Breshin because it's really interesting on the commercial side, but even for a homeowner, you're going to save money in operation. Typically, this is a really cool calculator from Consumer Reports. You can put, how big your lawn is, how long it takes you to mow, and how much gas costs you, and it'll tell you on average, what your break-even point is with a gas mower. But essentially, what this chart is saying is that the initial cost can be higher, and this is typically because of the batteries. The tools are roughly the same cost, but the batteries add cost. Think of it as buying a bunch of fuel up front, but over time, those costs are going to be significantly lower than the gas mower costs because of this operating cost savings, which can be very significant. The more you use the tools, of course, the higher the cost savings are, but they are significant because electricity and electric motors are so energy efficient. From a carbon emission standpoint, again, it's just no contest. This is estimates for an hour of use for various tools based on, the manufacturers and what they say, and the rate of burning gasoline and gasoline conversion to carbon emissions. But you can see a gas leaf blower, even a smallish one, is going to be about 5 pounds an hour, whereas an electric leaf blower is 0.5. So, 1/10, and similar for electric leaf blower. And this is average electricity. If you live in a place where you have clean electricity or you have solar panels, these numbers on the right would be 0. So it's possible for this electric equipment, to go to 0, which will, in terms of carbon emissions, which is not possible with gas. And then, of course, there's no air pollution with these devices. There's no combustion, and combustion is what causes air pollution. There's no filters or oil cans. There's no maintenance, which is another major cost savings with these devices. It's pretty exciting. This is ego, but if you look at the websites for almost all the manufacturers who make electric equipment now, there's almost any tool that you would need is available in an electric version, from the small, handheld ones that we're really familiar with, all the way up to riding mowers and these big, blowing snow blowers, etc. So there's more and more tools available all the time from pretty much all the brands. Speaking of brands, in general, you can think of this as there's some brands who tend to focus more on the professional market and others that tend to focus more on the homeowner market. There's a lot of crossover. Stihl, for example, does both, but they're really renowned in the commercial space. Crest is a little bit new to the United States, but also really big player in the commercial space. Husqvarna is another one. And then on the homeowner side, Ego, Makita, Greenworks, Ryobi, Cobalt, Milwaukee. There's others. These are some of the main ones that you might see. And some of these have commercial grade equipment as well, but they tend to be kind of two universes for equipment in this way. And then if you're thinking about doing this yourself, just a few tips that are worth remembering. I would say start with, buy the tool that you're going to use the most first. Do the research on what tool reviews and Consumer Reports and other people say about those tools and which ones are highly rated, etc. And then, buy all your tools from one brand. This is really important because it's we don't necessarily think about this for most of the things that we own. But in this case, because the batteries, are shared from device to device, you can save yourself a lot of money by having all your tools from one brand. And then buy a mix of batteries, get some light little ones that don't last so long. You might have small loads, small jobs. You want a little lightweight one. And then you've got big long-term jobs. You want a bigger, beefier one. And then keep your batteries plugged in and charging all the time. One last thing just on, battery recycling, because this is a typical question, what about the batteries? It's these batteries contain really important materials that are useful and can be recovered. They're also things you do not want to just cavalierly chuck into landfill. So there are really good battery recycling programs almost any Lowe's or Home Depot, Staples. They all have battery pickup places at their retail locations. And then there's this outfit called the Battery Network, which has thousands of locations in the United States, which will take these larger batteries. So one just final note, the market is seeing this. The market is shifting. Currently, about 47% of the tools that are out there are gas powered. This has changed a lot just in the last few years. If you visit Home Depot or someplace like that, you'll notice that there's a really, really large assortment of electric tools now. But if you ask people what they're planning to do, most of them, and this is consumers again, not necessarily commercial outfits, most people are planning to go to electric, because I think people just get it, that this is just better. But I think I'm really excited to bring on our other panelists now. I'm going to stop sharing, and we can start a kind of Q&A with Breshin, Billingsley, and Doug Gannon from Stihl, and kind of dive in a little bit more to this commercial side of things, which is changing really quickly and really exciting.
Brian, thanks so much. That was such a great intro and just kind of telling the story of why this matters and, just the vast amount of emissions too that this, these gas powered garden equipments are releasing. So really, really great. So for Breshin and Doug, would you mind just giving us a quick intro about your role at Stihl, and kind of how you got into this space, especially like into the electric space?
Yeah, Doug, can we get you to come on camera there too also? Go ahead, Breshin.
While Doug may or may not show up, I'm not sure. I roped him into this very last moment, so I wouldn't be completely utterly shocked if he was, hey, leave me out of this. But with all due respect, oh, there he is. So Doug and I both have a tremendous amount of experience in the OPE realm. We both have history of working in Stihl dealerships as well as in the field and using the equipment ourselves. A little bit of background for me was I actually grew up in the woods, three sides BLM, using chainsaws and trimmers and blowers and mowers in order to fend off our property and create boundary lines as fire breaks and things like that. After going through multiple other manufacturers of outdoor power equipment, finding Stihl was the solution. And from there, I fell in love with something that could be repaired and was professional enough for me to survive. So that's kind of my history. And then once I had the opportunity to, my first opportunity was I worked in a urban interface fire department, and I wasn't allowed to work on the chainsaws. And so I went down to the local Stihl dealer and said, I want you to fix this, but I don't want you to fix it. I want you to teach me how to fix it. And then I fixed the chainsaw. They offered me a job and I never left. And so that was over 15 years ago. So now I'm almost 15 years in the OPE industry, outdoor power equipment. And it's really just my role is a commercial solutions specialist. And that's now transitioned into territory manager. Doug is the commercial solutions specialist up in the Portland area, where there's a massive amount of conversion from gas to battery happening right in front of our faces. Some of it by force, some of it by county lines and things like that. As far as the regulation of that goes, it's basically, hey, this equipment is loud and we want to transition from gas to battery. Our big drive is helping people build relationships with battery. Everyone has association of, I have a gas can and I know how long I can work, and I have a crew and I know I have as many gas cans and pieces of equipment that they need for success on a daily basis. Striking out into the commercial landscape sector, our job is to educate. Our job is to create relationships with people and provide demo equipment so they can be successful. Later on, after Doug speaks, I'll share my screen and kind of go through a very great resource that we have to touch on what Brian mentioned as far as resources go. I would have loved to have seen all of that equipment in that presentation be Stihl, but the beauty of our world is that everybody has options. We have a good, better, and best for every battery line, and he's not wrong it's good to invest into a battery line that you know is going to suffice for every tool that you need for success. The great thing is Stihl has that ability. We don't have everything under the sun. Our company this year turns 100 years old. It's family owned, and every single Stihl dealer in the country is also independently owned. And that's the drive, and that's the foundation that Stihl presents is, hey, we're family owned. If you're going to be a Stihl dealer, you're also going to be independently and family owned. So that's the beauty of it.
Amazing.
I love working for a family owned company that stays true to its roots. But like every other manufacturer in the world, it's working very hard to keep the lights on. And in this time that we're currently in, it's seemingly to be more difficult, but uh, we're here to help. We're a free resource in the Pacific Northwest, and I'll go over that as well when I share my screen about all of the other resources that we share nationwide. So it's not if you don't live in Oregon and you're wanting to reach out to a professional Stihl person and ask about demo equipment on the commercial sector, we're here to help, and we have that ability to share those resources with you. So, Doug?
Cool. Thanks, Breshin. And just in the interest of time here, yeah, would you actually mind sharing screen and just jumping right into some of
Yeah.
the equipment offers? Because we'd love to see, yeah, kind of what some of these product offerings are, and like, give the audience a visual sense.
Yep, I hear you. And I do recognize that we're down to the last minute here, so I'll be very brief.
No, all good. I think we can run just a few minutes over. It's all good. So
Okay.
yeah, take
Oh,
about 10 minutes.
okay, so can everyone see my screen then? Is that
Yeah,
good?
yeah, it looks good.
Do I
I know
need
you
to
got
go?
pushed to the
Okay.
end, so apologies there, Breshin.
Yeah, you're all good. You're all good. Okay, so everybody can see this is the stihlusa.com website. It's going to geolocate you to your preferred dealer, and you can also search your preferred dealer by choosing your location. The one thing that I really want to highlight here is going into guides and projects. And this is where you're going to find all your relationship building tools. Okay. So, how to use, how to start. Buying guides is where it's like, hey, I have some equipment and I don't know what equipment I need to purchase in order to replace my current gas powered product based on size, based on power, based on versatility of what I want. Another one right here that I really like is the battery guides because it helps you build a relationship with what battery line do I need to go into? How many batteries am I going to need to be successful running compared to my gas powered product? And all of the different kind of questions that come up with people transitioning from gas to battery. How many batteries am I going to need? What size battery might I want? What charger might I want? Am I going to be charging, you know, one battery, two batteries, or 100 batteries? And so we have calculators to help you be successful in all of that. And each one of these menus going into the Learn More really break down every sector of those different things. So switching from gas to battery is not easy. And these are just tools to help you be successful in doing that. One thing that I really like to go into is just to give you an idea of this is kind of that similar space of I didn't know that there was a battery operated product that was comparable power to my gas powered unit. And you'd be shocked to hear that there is not a single gas powered handheld unit that we can't compare power wise to battery. And so that is substantial. Um, Here's some of the highlights that Brian had mentioned as well. Right here, AK product line. This is going to be your homeowner farm and ranch. AP is where Doug and I really live and stay because this is our professional battery operated line. AS is this our new smaller entry level homeowner, lightweight, but also gets used by professionals battery line. So we have our 4-inch chainsaw, we have a small vacuum, we even have a small air compressor that is just absolutely phenomenal. And as you can see, every single battery operated line, there is a comparable unit to either a homeowner or a professional end user capability, all the way up into our battery operated zero turns.
Hey, I love this, Breshin, and maybe for some of you folks who aren't as familiar with this whole industry, Stihl is, I believe, the number one commercial outdoor power tool supplier in the United States. And, they've built their brand and their company on gas powered tools. But I think what you see here is just the confidence that they're projecting about battery tools as being able to step in and become the new tool of choice in this industry. But we are in a transition, so maybe that would be some good questions to be asking. Breshin is just like, what are you seeing? Obviously the tools are there now, but I know this can be a pretty conservative audience. They're very careful about wanting to be able to please their customers, and they know how to do things now. And so this is a big change. So what are you seeing in terms of the commercial acceptance of these electric tools?
Well, to be completely frank, it's truly people don't believe or understand that the battery operated comparable unit is as powerful as their gas powered product.
Mm-hmm.
You have something where, hey, that's extremely quiet. There's no way it's as strong as my loud, ferocious backpack blower. Hey, that mower is just charging through that tall grass without issue. There's no way that battery product could do that either. And then once they have the experience of actually using the product, they really are able to develop that fond feeling of, hey, the job's done, and I was successful in doing so with the battery operated product, where I previously didn't believe that. And as you can see here in this display, there's literally an extremely large assortment of every comparable battery product that you could compare to gas. And I will say, Stihl started their professional battery line, the AP battery line, over 13 years ago, before bringing it into the US. And they started their relationship with electric actually the very first year of their manufacturing. Their very first chainsaw was an electric chainsaw run off of a very large piece of dozer equipment to get people into the woods. And now we've, 90 years later, gone back into that realm. Yes, Stihl is one of the, it is the number one landscaper preferred professional tool. And that's an extremely nice thing to say. But it's all relevant to kind of what people get into initially. And like you said, it's a transition, and it's not easy. And that's where Doug and I come in to help, is because people don't really get a chance sometimes, and they go into, and what we see a lot is, we call it ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, or whatever. They'll go into a store and they'll see a battery operated product and they'll buy it, and they're not making necessarily an informed decision based on having been qualified into that product. They go home with said product, or they go into the commercial landscape setting with that product, and they literally destroy that product, or they get extremely frustrated because they didn't have the battery capacity that they believed they should have, or they didn't have enough batteries, or the job wasn't done because the machine wasn't the quality of product that they needed to be successful in doing so, and all of those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
it's super difficult to say distinctively this is the answer, because every single person experiences something different. And I can't tell you how many times we've gone into commercial landscape setting areas where they should be using battery, and they have hidden in the back a blower or a mower or a trimmer, because the tools that they were given to go be successful in completing the task weren't good enough, or didn't last long enough, or weren't strong enough, or whatever it may have been, or damaged because of being used for other intended purposes. And that's the one thing I love, is that when we go and do demos, we see people's reaction change from what they've previously experienced. And building that relationship and helping them understand, you've got to have enough batteries in your truck before you strike out at the day, because if you run out of fuel, aka your battery, then you're not going to be able to complete your task. And so, unlike a gas can, it's one of those things where, we'll strike out in the morning and go hit the road, and we see all these guys lined up at the gas station. And all of those people are preparing their fuel for the day to go into battle, into the landscapes that they're trying to successfully tend to. What if there was no gas at that station? So what if you had 30 batteries and none of them were charged? You have that comparable relationship right there. So,
Right.
just real quick, just want to go back over this.
Doug, it looked kind of, Doug, it looked like maybe you had something you wanted to add there. What,
I just, in closing, I just wanted to say one thing about, you guys can hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds great.
Just in closing for battery products. Brian, by the way, I loved your presentation, and maybe you want to throw this piece into it for future, is make sure that the manufacturer that you purchase your battery equipment from has an after sales plan for you. Make sure that
Yes.
they have parts and accessories and service to support the product you're buying. Otherwise, if something breaks, you're throwing it in the trash, and we do not want to throw stuff in the trash. I'm tired of it. It's not sustainability. So make sure that
Yeah, that's a good
manufacturer
point.
has a plan for you after the sale, and then make sure they have a battery management system built into the tool, the battery, and the charger. That's going to make everything safe. It's going to make it operate safe. It's going to make it charge safe. Okay, that way you can go to sleep at night with that battery sitting on that charger, knowing you're 100% safe. So just those two things: make you have a battery management system in your tool. Make sure they have an after sales plan for you to support you.
Awesome.
That's great. Hey, just maybe on battery charging, you know, I can imagine, you know, it's one thing for a homeowner, you buy a tool, maybe you got a couple batteries. So oftentimes the batteries come with chargers, or you can buy them that way. So it's not that big a deal. You've got a couple of plugs you need to dedicate to a battery charger. But when you're talking about one of these commercial operations with 30 or 50 batteries, it's a whole different thing. So, you know, I think that's the other thing that's pretty exciting about this space from what I've seen. But you guys, I'd love your point of view, is that the battery charging systems that are now available, that are smart, that aren't going to like totally blow your circuit boards in your electrical panel, are available and are pretty cool. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's Breshin's pulling it up online right now. So Breshin, go ahead.
Yeah, so we actually have a very amazing, what Doug was referring to is our battery management system. Every single one of our batteries has an internal management system. Our chargers have an internal management system. And now we have both a CM6 and a CM12, which is a charging management solution device, essentially allowing you on a 20 amp circuit to plug in this device and effectively plug in 12 of our largest chargers all at once on one circuit. What this does is it uses an algorithm to systematically go through every single charger, systematically go through every single battery, and begin topping them off in phases of 3 at a time, effectively throughout every single one. So it's going to charge it efficiently up to 80%, and then it's going to efficiently charge it up to 100% and move on to the next and do the exact same thing. The really cool part about this is you see the price tag up there of $1,200. We have 2 ProFleet buy-in programs to where you could actually receive up to 20% off of this if you're a ProFleet customer, having purchased $5,000 worth of equipment at one time. You're locked in for that discount for an entire calendar year. So that's one assisting method to people transitioning into the battery spectrum. Now, this right here is cool because it has an internal braking mechanism. So let's say there was a power surge, or you know, you might be in one of those areas where all of a sudden the power that you had planned to have overnight is actually not there. A lightning strike or a power outage or whatever. This is not going to trip the breaker with all of those devices, all those chargers plugged in. It has an internal mechanism to, well, there is some kind of power change, it will shut itself off. And then it will begin looping for power. So every 3 seconds, it'll reach out and it will strive to see if there is any available power nearby, and it will begin to turn back on if there is. And that way, you know for certain, as far as the safety comment that Doug made, that when you get back into the shop in the morning, or you get back into your commercial setting, or wherever you are with this device plugged in, that all of your batteries are going to be ready for your cruise or for whatever situation you're about to get yourself into.
That's very cool. Hey, no, I know we're short on time here, but it feels like we need to talk about operating cost savings, you know, because that's like one of the really cool things about how do you guys talk about that? I mean, you know, you can do the calculations and you just see that electric motors are going to use a fraction of the amount of energy that that gas devices need, and therefore the cost. But there's all these other things, charging. You need plenty of batteries, blah blah blah. So how do you
Yeah.
talk to your customers about the potential for operating savings?
Well, I mean, it's very much so case by case basis. We deal a lot with folks that we experience people have downtime from having to repair their gas powered products, or go into um, the cost of fuel, the cost of maintenance, just like what you had mentioned. We actually have a calculator that we can go into, and you can begin your own transition into battery by using that. So, on average, in a commercial setting, what we're seeing in a calendar year per unit is approximately $1,800 savings. Now it's gas every single time that product is used. It's maintenance. It's even downtime consideration, which isn't a part of that analytic. Your crews a lot of times are younger folks. Everybody knows how to push a button and start a product, and not a lot of folks know how to unflood a flooded product or how to start a problematic gas powered unit. So that's something also to consider. One thing that's really cool about all of our batteries is in that battery management system, we can actually anticipate a lifespan. So for our AP300 batteries, we can get up to 1,200 cycles of charging. And up to our 500 batteries, we can charge up to 2,000 charge cycles, meaning 100% charge to zero would be one, before the probability of that battery depleting to about 80% capacity. Another really cool thing about our batteries is that every single one of our batteries has already had the recycling paid for by a 1-800 call to recycle battery program. And so a lot of those batteries that you have to recycle, if they're not already purchased, if they're not already paid for as far as recycling goes, it might be a very high cost to the consumer. But Stihl has already gone and included that in the cost of the batteries. Every single one that we have, aka AORP or AR, which is our backpack battery system that is capable of the equivalent of 5 of our smaller handheld batteries.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Breshin. And again, Brian, really, really excellent presentation. I would love to listen to this all day. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up here, but yeah, thank you for providing your contact info. So, folks, I'm sure you can reach out if you have inquiries or questions or whatever it is. If you're running a garden electrification program, I'm sure the folks at Stihl can provide more info. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. And just a couple closing things here. So we're gonna go to the end. So, folks. So if you didn't already see it, kindly share your feedback in this short survey. It'll be in the chat. And then I wanted to shout out that San Diego Learn does have additional courses. So if you found this interesting and want to dive into some other topics like heat pump water heaters with thermal storage or space heating heat pumps, or even whole home batteries, you can go to san-diego-learn.com and find those or scan these QR codes. They're totally free, just a good way to get some more info. So with that, just wanted to say thanks again to all of our presenters here. Thanks everyone who joined us. And we'll hopefully see you at the next webinar. Cheers, folks, and have a great rest of your week. And huge thanks again to the presenters.
All right, you guys take care.
Thanks for having us.